The objective for this lesson is I can solve trig equations. We're going to be using the unit circle on this. You may have these values memorized, but this is to emphasize the repetitive nature of these periodic functions. So you may have directions for the different problems that will limit the domain of what you have to solve these equations, but sometimes you will get an infinite number of them because periodic functions go on and repeat. So let's look at this first one. We've got sine, a cosine, and a tangent. So for the sine function, I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 2. So when I do that, I get sine of x is equal to 1/2. I go over to my chart here and I look for 1/2 for the sine function, which is the y value of these ordered pairs. So there's a 1/2 and here's a 1/2. So I get both an answer of 30 degrees and 150 degrees for that. Now if you're doing it in radians, you get pi over 6 and you get 5 pi over 6, but we're going to do these in degrees. So I get an answer of 30 degrees and 150. Now, you have to remember that if I add 360 onto these, I get a coterminal angle, it will give me the same value. So if I add 360 onto 30 and get 390, 2 times sine of 390 is also going to equal 1. So I've got to represent the fact that it could be multiples of 360 being added on. So I put plus 360 times k, where k is an integer. So that would represent where I could add 360s on or I could subtract 360s off. And the same thing with 150. I'm going to add 360k onto that to represent the periodic nature of the sine function. All right, now let's try this one. Let's go ahead and add 3 to both sides to start our solving process. 3 cosine of x equals 3. Divide by 4. Cosine of x is equal to 3/4. And then I go ahead and take the square root of both sides. So cosine of x is going to equal plus or minus, because we're taking the square root of both sides. And then we'll have the square root of 3 over 2. Now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to find 4 different spots where cosine is going to equal that. Now it's going to be very similar to this, but I'm going to get rid of these just so that I have a fresh start here. And so for this, I'm going to look for the square root of 3 over 2, there, right there. Here's negative square root of 3 over 2. Here's negative square root of 3 over 2. And then here's square root of 3 over 2 for the x value, and in the ordered pairs, cosine is the x value. So I now have 4 answers here. I'm going to have 30 degrees, and I'm going to have 150. I'm going to have 210, and then I'm also going to have 330. Now I'm going to add 360k onto each of these for my answer to represent the periodic nature of it. Now, this is the answer, but there's also a little bit more of an answer that I can really reduce it down a little bit, because if you notice, 30 plus 180 is 210. So I could make this instead, make it 30 degrees plus 180 degrees times k, because if I add 180, I'll get that. And if I add another 180, I'll go to the 360 added onto that. So this is a little more elegant if I combine those two. Or if I put these two together, they're also 180 apart. So I could put 150 degrees plus 180k. So sometimes you'll see enough repetition that they'll repeat on a more regular basis than 360. These are correct. This is just a little more elegant, a little more reduced in the format that we write the answer. Now let's try the tangent. Just a reminder that tangent is has a period of 180 degrees. So when I do this, I'm going to go tangent of x equals negative square root of 3. Now you have to recall, when using our unit circle, okay, so unit circle is one that doesn't have tangent as values, but you do know that tangent is sine over cosine. And so if I were to put this sine, y value over the x, I would end up with square root of 3. Same thing here, only this one would be a negative square root of 3. So I'm going to circle this one, because I put that y value over that one, I'll get a negative. This one over here, I get a positive again, so tangent's positive again in this quadrant. And if I go all the way to the fourth quadrant, and I go with this one over, if I go with this one over this one, so it would have been this y value over that y value in this quadrant. So this one here, 300 degrees for this one. Now if you look at those two, again, since the period is 180, if I add 180 onto 120, I get the 300. So all I need to write for this one is 120 degrees plus 180k, because it repeats every 180. So another 180 would bring it back for around to the other way. So just remember your tangent cotangent has a period of 180, so that changes it from the typical of having 360k to 180k. If you were doing this in radians, for instance, this 30 degrees would have been pi over 6, and one full rotation to get a coterminal angle would have been to add 2 pi on. So it would have been pi over 6 plus 2 pi times k if I was doing it in radians. So when we solve equations, you solve the equation, you get the trig function by itself. Use your memorized values or your unit circle to find those values. And then remember, since it is repetitive because of the periodic nature, you add 360k on for the sine and cosine, and you add 180 for the tangent, and that will get your infinite number of solutions for these problems. Remember though, if the directions instruct you to limit your domain, then limit your answers to just those values.